Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole, Revere School Committee meeting. It's June 21st, 2022. It is currently 5:05. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. To the left. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Do we want to go out of order? Do we have a motion to go out of order?
I make the motion to go out of order.
Second.
And to which one would you like to go to for the public information?
Number 2, discussion of primary election day, while we have the election commissioner here.
Pardon me?
Oh, see, no, he has the one that has it on it. I told you it was on there.
It's
For
not.
some reason-
That's old. Anyhow, so my suggestion is we're going to item number 4, the regular meeting agenda items and
See, it
miscellaneous.
is still on there, but it's not on this.
So
Okay.
how did you want to bring this up, Ms. Gravelisi?
Thank you, Ms. Rizzo. During one of our Safety and Security Subcommittee meetings, we had discussed the fact that we are going to have school on primary election day, January 6th. During that meeting, there was discussion, regarding safety concerns for our students and our staff. So we have now the election commissioner and Mr. Paul Capizzi here to answer any questions that the committee members have that we were not able to answer at that time because we didn't have the information. So if there's committee members that have questions for...
I,
Yeah, I know.
sorry. I'm sorry, I wasn't here or privy to prior conversations this committee may have had about the, whether to close the school on the election day. But one of my first concerns, and one of the reasons I wanted to come, other than to answer your questions, was, and I don't know if the ship has sailed, but I wanted to encourage all of you to vote to close the schools on election day so that we could allow to have elections go forward. Has that already been decided?
Primary, for the election, not the primary.
Well, on the election day, we are closed, but we are open on primary day, September 6th. And now the conversation is to, the Safety and Security Subcommittee would like it to be closed on that day. So it's been brought forward to the Committee of the Whole.
I'm not going to speak to the safety or any of that, but I just wanted to encourage all of you, and you should all know, I mean, you're all elected officials, that, I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but voting is a constitutionally protected right that we all have, correct? And it's the most fundamental way that our citizens can participate in the democratic process, and thus you're all here as a member of the Republic. You represent your constituents who voted for you. I think it's an obligation on all of us to make voting as easy and convenient as possible. The schools offer that opportunity for Revere, and I can't speak for how other municipalities all do theirs, but give us that space that we desperately need to conduct these elections. You have plenty of space, you have handicap accessibility for people to get in the buildings, you have plenty of parking, and you have accessible restrooms. I feel it's our obligation, our duty, in fact, to make voting as seamless as we can possibly do it, and not just for the voters, but also for the poll workers. It's much harder on them when they have to go to all these different places, and it's much harder on the election commissioner, Paul Fahey, sitting there, and he can answer questions about this if you have them, to get the number of poll workers that we need at all these different smaller locations, and he's running around like crazy on election day. I can give you some examples that I've experienced. There was a contested mayoral race not that long ago. I was at St. Mary's with then Diane Colella. The parking lot was full. People had to go over to Stop and Shop to park. People holding the signs were too close to the door. There was some congestion at the door. We can't control that. In fact, when you first went into St. Mary's, I think you had to go up a few steps to get to where the polling was. At the schools, you don't have to do that. We control the schools. We can say when and where with the schools. We don't have that luxury with all these other buildings, whether it's the VFW or the cultural center or some of these churches. In fact, I know that St. Anthony's has been a problem because they have bingo on Monday nights. And they're all set up for bingo, and then Paul has to get all his people in there as late as he can, or as early, I'm not sure which, to then clear out all the tables for bingo and then set up all the polling stuff. It's much easier for us, working with the custodians, to go to the schools and do this. It just makes more sense. I personally would love to have voting all in one spot, just because I've worked on recounts and worked with Diane. I know how chaotic voting day can be, and I know that's not an option right now. But we own these schools. They're large. Again, ample room, ample parking, restrooms. It just makes sense to be able to set up the polling places there. I know you don't want it to interfere with the school day and the students, so I understand that that can be a problem, so maybe it makes more sense to close them. And I honestly don't know what's in the school calendar. I have no idea. I'm always hearing there are days closed for this and for that. If those days can be scheduled on the election days, which there's only 2 a year every 2 years, that would really help the city, help the voters, I think, and certainly help the election department to run and control the elections. We want to express the importance of voting. We want to let people know that we really care about this. And if we can utilize our own resources to do it, that's first and foremost what I think we should do. So I urge you to remain closed on Election Day. That's my spiel.
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Capozzi?
Capizzi. That's okay. I've only been here 21 years. It's
Paul,
okay.
I am so sorry.
That's okay.
Anyway, Ms. Milbury Ellis?
Sure. I understand from what I'm hearing is that the schools are clearly more convenient. However, I guess my position is that if I'm looking at what's in the best interest of the kids, it's for them to be in school.
Of course.
And so I obviously don't want to compromise their safety, going to Susan's point. However, I feel as if there are alternative buildings that can be used within the jurisdiction, this isn't like a podunk town with one building in it, then those buildings should be, considered first. So
Well, I agree with you that we're not a podunk town. We don't have a lot of municipal buildings. We have other buildings that we've used, whether it's the Satter House, whether it's the churches, whether it's the cultural center, whether it's the Point of Pines Yacht Club. But as far as municipal buildings, City Hall is pretty much it. And that's not big enough nor accommodating enough to handle all of the voting. I agree, the students should not miss school. But I think we should also set an example to the students by saying this is important. Voting is important. I mean, look at what's been going on nationally over voting. Look at states that are changing the voting rules and rights. We want to make sure that us kids know and the voters know that voting matters. That is the most important thing we can all do and part of a democratic process. And I'm not saying miss school. I don't know anything about the calendar, so I don't want to speak out of turn. But I know when there's snow days get added on. And this is a day where you should set this aside, again, ahead of the time, I think, with the school calendar, and knowing, okay, this is a voting day, this is what we're going to do, this is why we're going to do it. I'm not saying take anything away from the kids. I don't want to give that impression. I hope I'm not giving that impression. I'm not saying school isn't important or that they shouldn't go to school every day. But I'm just saying we have to weigh the two things right now, and voting is super important. And it seems to me with all the school days that there are, that it would be okay to close it for 1 or 2 days every 2 years. That's my opinion. I'm not speaking against anything you guys have decided.
And those days are added on to the end of the calendar year, just like a snow day, just to...
Mr. Ferranti?
Thank you, Mrs. Bronson. Paul, my question becomes this. If we have a special election, and let's just take Ward 4, for example, because the Hill School they vote at, what are we going to do for that?
Special elections are that, special elections. We cannot predict necessarily when we're going to have them. It would be ideal, in consultant with Paul Fahey, the election commissioner, to get the most ideal spot to do it at that time. If it's a school in that ward and that makes sense, fine. That's a very good question. I wouldn't say close the schools in Ward 6 because there's an election in Ward 4. That wouldn't make any sense. And I don't know what the answer is to that. I haven't even mulled that over.
Well, I think it's something to really think about because we have one now in July, for Ward 5, and take any school, and they say, well, you shut down that school, why don't you shut down mine because of the traffic, whatever. So I think it's, if we're going to be consistent, we're going to say, look, either we're going to shut it down or we're not. And I don't think you just shut down one school versus the whole city. It's just my opinion.
And Can I speak to that point for a minute? Just, I know
Dr. Kelly?
Paul's going to respond, but I think Michael's point is really valid. It's a real challenge for us to say that one school is going to be closed and the rest of them are going to be open. That puts a huge burden on parents when they have to provide childcare for some of their kids, but not for others. And it also puts a burden on them when we get to the end of the year and one student is finishing school on, say, Tuesday, and the other doesn't finish till Wednesday. So,
Mr. Fahey?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. So the example I would use is, and I know I came in at the tail end of a long series of special elections, and I know that's coloring people's thinking, and I totally understand that. We have an ability, I think, to be more flexible with a special election. So 2 examples. One is that we had the special Senate primary on my second day on the job, on the 14th, my birthday. Thank you all very much. And that was a very heavily contested election. There was a local candidate. There was a candidate who was now the senator. So it was a busy election. The January 11th election was not busy. There was only one candidate on the ballot. An election's an election. We have to run them either way. But we knew that the numbers were going to be down significantly. So we worked in schools where there were challenges. And I may be switching these because that was my first month. But it was either the Hill School or the Wayland School. We had the election in the cafeteria. But because we knew the turnout was going to be so much less, we talked to Diane, we talked to the principal there, and we moved it to another room. So that is an option. If you remember when we had the special election in late January, it's all running together, we consolidated the entire city into one voting location for that one election. That was very much of a unique election because it wasn't ordered by the city, it was ordered by the regional school district. So to answer the question, there will always be specials. The one this summer, we are still using the current polling locations. That's going to change in the fall very slightly. The major effect for the schools is that we'll have more of a presence at the high school than we've had in the past. But it is the summer, so we're not going to have that problem. I can't I can't look at a crystal ball and say this will never happen. I have a couple of thoughts that are just facts. One is that the 2 special elections that we had that were contested were for the legislative seats for this area. Both of those individuals are relatively new in those positions. That does not mean that somebody couldn't get hit by a bus. It doesn't mean somebody couldn't leave office. So I would never want to get up here and say, this is never going to be a problem, because I'd be misrepresenting. But I think we have that ability under normal circumstances. I think these elections, because they're state and federal elections, while the local races are not particularly contested, we do have a full slate of candidates on one party side and a fairly busy slate on the other side. So I expect that this will be a busy day. The only point I want to make about the safety, and I know you all are very concerned about this as well, and I think I mentioned this when I was here the last time, and I've talked to Diane, I've talked to the mayor, I've talked to HR. We know that having poll workers in the building with kids has the potential for problems. Knock on wood, it hasn't happened yet. So one of the things that we're going to do, regardless of what your decision is that we are going to start a process of doing criminal background checks on all of our poll workers. We did have a situation with a poll worker who had a criminal background, nothing to put any kids at risk. It was a totally different issue, but misrepresented something, and it turned out that they had a problem. So we've talked about that, and that is something that we're going to do in the future. So I'm happy to, with Paul, answer any other questions, but I just wanted to share those thoughts.
I just wanted to go back to the special election that you said was held at the school. I think it was the Wayland School. Were the kids in school at that time? I don't remember.
They were, and the concern that the principal had and that Diane and I talked about was that the cafeteria would not be available. So what we did, because there was such a low turnout for that election, is we segregated the polling places into just a couple of classrooms. So we did have to shut off a small portion of the building, but we didn't conflict with the cafeteria, which is where we usually do, because we have 3 polling places that run out of that.
And how was the security handled?
There's school security that's there. I'll be honest, I thought it was okay, but not optimal. That's one of the, I don't want to sound like I have some vision that other people don't have, but one of the first thoughts when I watched these elections was, at a bare minimum, the individuals, our people who are interacting, for this one time. I don't know how school employees are processed. I'm sure you have a process for that, but our employees, are a different story, is that we want to make sure that at a minimum, that there's no criminal background with any of them. So that's something that we're going to be working on between now and the fall.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Ferranti?
Thank you, Mrs. Brunswick. Paul, the only question I really have is, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if you have a ward fight, no matter which ward, and they're using a school, and you want to move it to a different location, isn't that going to make it tougher for the people to vote? I know at large it really doesn't make much of a difference, but a ward thing really concerns me about this. And then I just think that if you're going to be consistent, well, if we have a special election, okay, we have one for a primary, we're going to shut it down, we're going to have a thing. I mean, you either got to shut everything down or nothing down. And if, just in, for a little fact that in our last election, November, we got 20% turnout with this, with the large ward and school committee. I know for the election for state senate was less than that. So the numbers seem to be trending the other way. And I'm not saying that's going to happen here, but I just think you got to be consistent across the board what we're going to do. That's just my last question.
Well, my thought is that, and this is part of when I know we talked briefly at the last meeting about the desirability of using school buildings versus other buildings, and there's a couple of issues. One is they allow us to consolidate precincts. Apparently, and again, I'm new to the city, but my understanding is in the past, literally every precinct had its own polling location. Well, it's a logistical nightmare, and even more so now with technology. It's not the old days with the old voting machines or just people, with the dimple chads and everything. I mean, we have technology, and we're moving toward more technology. I was just at the City Town Clerks Association. We're moving to, in Massachusetts, it's not officially yet, but it's coming probably in the next year and a half, to poll pads, which are literally just iPads. What that does is if you've all voted, obviously, you've run for office or you've lived in the community, is the paper is just absurd, the amount of paper that gets just printed and wasted for that one day. There's a way to do it with poll pads and with a backup system that is safe, that is not open to any sort of security problems. It's not registering the votes, it's registering the fact that you voted on a particular day. So that's one of the advantages of the school. Those situations will come up, but I think one of the issues that's come up, we did a survey of residents with the city council support to see what some of the concerns were, and the two main ones, one was signage, which is absolutely a huge problem, and we've got a plan to address that. But people are sort of used to this system now. We've had this for the bad thing is we had 7 elections in 1 year. The good thing is people pretty much vote in the same location during that whole time, with primarily the one off of the regional school district. People seem to want continuity. They also would like to have a local polling place, no question about it. The other things that are happening, and this is actually new since I saw you last, the legislature has finally approved what's called the Votes Act, and the governor, I believe he signed it today. It is going to codify some of the things that we've had in the past with early voting. We will have early voting for a week or so before the election. We will not be in the school building for that. We won't do that to you. We have some other places in mind. Vote by mail, you've probably seen some of the ads on television already. Even before the governor signed the bill, the Secretary of State jumped on that one. So there are other options for people who don't have that local access to voting. And I think you're going to see some of the practices that came into effect, like a lot of things with the pandemic, things we learned and changes to procedure. I think you're going to see more of that. I can't tell you that we'll never have one-offs, but our goal would be to not do that very much. As Paul mentioned, normally you have the two elections in a state year like this. Next year would just be the municipal election. If there is a preliminary, we would work with you on that. And then the following year, the additional would be the presidential primary. So that's where we stand right now. So I'd rather not change it because I think it does confuse people. I think people are sort of used to this system. But if we have to, bottom line, Diane and I had this conversation, we'll make it work. I mean, if at the end of the day there are students in the building, we'll do what we have to. But my concern's about their safety as much as anybody else's.
So, first of all, I want to thank you for that survey, and listening to the people that filled out that survey. I found it very helpful. And also to the point that all of us would like to see the city engaged in the election process. And our students learn a lot through it. They'll hold their own councils before, the election day, so they learn a lot to it. My personal thing, you talk about continuity, and to me, the students need continuity. They're just getting back to school, and there's Labor Day, and then they're just getting back to school, and it's going to be primary day. But with that being said, I don't see a reason why we can't have the elections in the school why students are in school. We have, and I've said this a million times, so people here are really tired of hearing me, but a lot of us just experience moving on ceremonies with hundreds of people coming into the building, into the hallways, using elevators, so they're actually in the corridors of our school. Whereas the voting has their own exit and entrance, and there's no need to come into the building. So, not that it's my decision, but if it is the choice to have school on election days, so that the public has continuity, our students have continuity, I would just like to see between you, Dr. Kelly, Chris Bright, Dave Callahan, just to get that little bit more security in place of what's going on. That's all, that's what I would ask, if it's decided that way.
I do want to just push back a tiny bit, Madam Vice Chair. I do think that there are schools where the main entrances is where, I know for a fact from the elections that I've done, where they do come in. We have some flexibility in some buildings to maybe, cut something off, but not in every building. But I totally agree with you about the security and signage and communication. Those are, to be honest, when the mayor hired me, those were the things he said that we needed to improve. That we have a solid system, it works, but we need to improve it. We've just come off COVID, we've just come off all these special elections, so we're absolutely committed to that. And at the end of the day, whatever the circumstances are, the superintendent and I have already had a good working relationship, and that's going to continue. We'll make it work, but we do want to make it work for everybody. And just briefly on the younger people, we've started to engage. We're going to have interns this summer. I want young people to volunteer, and actually I shouldn't say to volunteer, to actually get paid to be poll workers. I want them to work at the polls. I'd love to, Diane, prepare yourself. I'd love to do some kind of an educational piece. I've taught civics. I've taught at the I've taught overseas. I've taught at the undergrad level and grad level. And I would love to have a group of students who are really interested in literally take them through the whole process and let them see how it really works and have them there. Maybe not at 6:30 in the morning, but have them there for some part of election day. That's true. That's true. But so I think there are those opportunities, and some of the legal changes that were made under the Votes Act actually make it easier. The state's very prescribed about poll workers. They're supposed to come from party lists and so forth, and a lot of that is kind of, particularly with so many unenrolled voters, is sort of out of date. So that's changing it, but that gives us an opportunity to get younger people engaged, and that's something, whatever happens with this decision, that I'm excited about, and I want to work with the right people.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Just
Dr.
to
Kelly.
that point, I know that the schools check IDs when people come into ceremonies and events, but that's not allowed at Election Day. Am I right about that?
So checking IDs for the purpose of voting is not allowed unless you are an inactive voter. So that you may have been in this situation. If you don't, we're always saying do your census form. If you don't and you go on the inactive voter list, you can still vote, but you do have to provide ID.
Okay.
So as far as providing ID as part of, I think I'll defer to council. I think it could raise some concerns about if I'm an active voter, you don't need an ID for me to vote, but do you need an ID for me to enter the building? So it would something we'd have to think about. I mean, I think we can staff it between our security. We have police at all of the locations, at every poll. We have poll workers. We have great support and assistance from the custodial staff and from folks in the school department. I think if we tighten that up a little bit as far as where people are going, I think that'll hopefully solve most of the problems. And again, I don't anticipate that this doing a background check is it's not a be-all, end-all, but it's just another level of awareness of, these people are potentially going to, what if students are, what if it's not a school day and they're in the building for a club meeting or something like that? We really want to protect the students here as well as our own people.
And I will say, there are many events that I went to in the past couple of weeks that did not require any ID whatsoever. And an ID doesn't really tell you anything. There's nothing stamped on an ID to say if they're a sexual offender, you have a name. But I want it tighter between the schools, between the city hall, No, and like you said, you have a good working relationship, and hopefully, no matter what, you're going to do what's best for our students in the city.
For what it's worth, I'm a former school committee member myself, so I understand.
I know
I've worn
that.
hat,
Yeah.
and I do genuinely understand. I talked to some of the school, some of the clerks, most cities and towns, that the clerk does elections. Here, we're sort of unique, but, everyone does the same thing. And increasingly, they're moving to this consolidated model where they can vote. The community I used to work in has 6 precincts. They all vote in one school. And I have to say, from a logistical perspective, a safety perspective, a community knowledge perspective, everyone knows. And it's a much smaller community, so I'm not suggesting that you would do that here, but it's the big day in town. Everyone goes to vote, and it's nice. It has that sort of town feel to it, even in a bigger community, so.
It'd be nice if it was a larger group, too. If more people came out, so it would be nice.
Yeah. I mean, the flip side is, with these other options, I think a lot of people will avail, to Paul's earlier point, that for us, I mean, you have to look out for the kids first and foremost. We have to look out for the integrity of the election process. They're not exclusive of each other, but the fact that we have mail-in voting, that we have the early voting, we have these other options, we may never see those huge numbers again. So, maybe in a few years, we would come back and say, hey, let's look at reconfiguring this, because we don't want to waste anyone's resources. I'm getting deep in the weeds on this.
Thank you. You've given us a lot of information to think about for our next meeting. And again, thank you for all your help. And Paul, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. I just hope all your questions have been answered. I hope we've addressed everything that you want us to address. If you think about anything later, you know where to find us. We're at City Hall. If anything else comes up that you feel is important that we should know about, and I know we have to be cognizant of open meeting law and all that, but we could always put it on a future agenda to get back to you if there was something else. Or if either of you have any questions on the side, you want to reach me at the solicitor's office, you can.
Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate it.
I'll have my attorney with me anytime. Thank you all. Good luck. Thank you.
So do we have a motion to go back to the original agenda?
Make the motion.
Second. So I'm having a hot flash. On to the consent calendar. Approval of minutes. Anyone have any questions on the approval? No?
So moved.
The warrants that are attached. Anyone have any questions on the warrants? Mr. Ferranti?
Thank you, Mrs. Rizzo. I only have 3.
Oh, wow.
I only have 3. Matt, on page 3, number 108, 109, their professional development with Rebus Associates in public. Have we done professional development recently, or is that a prior bill?
So we partner with Rebus and Associates to do the evaluation training for all administrators during the school year, and new administrators take a full course through him in the first year of their employment. So the larger number there, the 22,000, would be the fees for all of our new administrators to complete that course. And then the smaller number, the 4,200, was professional development that was ongoing throughout the school year.
All right, on page,
Observation on that. Rebus came into us when we first started under ed reform, and they have been terrific all the way through. And it's a shout out to them for what kind of work they have done in the Revere school system. So I was going to mention them as well, so thank you,
can.
Michael.
okay,
Mr. Ferranti?
thank you. On page 6, number 203, Commonwealth Auto Body, 20,000 plus for repairs. What did we fix for 20,000?
That was a transportation vehicle that was in an accident, that was crashed into. So that vehicle was repaired. The reason you see such an odd amount is because it is the exact amount of the insurance check that we received for that work. So that's an in and out. We received that check and then paid the vendor. So that's why it's such a large one-time amount to
So
Commonwealth.
it's one of our
Auto Body.
vehicles then?
Yes.
Okay. And my last question's on page 14, number 516, WB Mason Company for 23,000 plus. It says guide/study room wall RHS. Just a little explanation of that one, please.
I can
Do you know
speak to
that
that. So that was the new office that was built in the Learning Commons at Riviera High School to accommodate the new college and career counselors that we hired.
Thank you.
And you notice it's a 1.7 account, so that was covered from costs, income received through renting our space, turning that money around to improve our space.
Ms. Ty?
Page 9, please, at the very bottom of the page, A1 lighting service for the exterior and parking lot lights. Was that repair of lights that we already have out there, or did we have additional lights installed?
No, if we were using A1, it would have been repair of existing lights. The purchase order would have several line items on it. That's why you're seeing multiple payments to that vendor.
Do we have a problem with the lights out there being deliberately vandalized?
I don't know.
I just use of.
Yeah.
Thank you. The other one, the bottom of page 2, and continues on 3, and maybe Dr. Kelly might know this. The nursing services from Northeastern, I notice it's for SPED. These folks come in all the time to do services with our SPED kids?
No, sometimes some of our special needs students have to have a nurse with them as they travel, depending on the severity of their needs, and that's more likely what that is. Sometimes when we don't have a nurse on hand who can go on a field trip, we'll hire out that service to go with the kids. But typically, it's I would guess that was for individual students who needed some care.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I'm so discombobulated today. I just have a question on page 13, number 468 through 478. It doesn't give the whole title of the company being paid, and it's for class packs, which I was curious on what class packs were.
So it's Center for the Collaborative Classroom. That is our new literacy program that we are implementing K-5. And those are grade level class packs.
What would be included in, like,
It could be consumable materials or like books, reading literacy books.
okay, thank you very much. Mr. Mayor?
Hi, Mrs. Rizzo. Thanks for calling me out for being a little late.
I did.
I'm happy to be here.
Gee, thanks. Okay, next item. Anyone have questions on financial reports? We don't have any. Food service financial, there is none. Communications, there is none. Enrollment update, none. And personal items, anyone have any questions on the retirements or new hires or any of that? I do have a request for Dr. Kelly, if possible, when we do exit surveys, if you could allow us a summary of those exit surveys, that would be appreciated.
We anticipate there'll be more changes in the coming months, and at the August meeting, Dr. Mokaba will present a summary. I think we did one last year, right? And we had the different categories of reason that people gave. So we'll look to replicate that again this year.
Thank you. Acceptance of donations. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Milbury Ellis.
No problem. I just have a question. Is this customary to have this many resignations, 53 resignations?
I would say that this is higher than typical, but it's not wildly higher.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else have questions on that? Okay, acceptance of donations. We have a great one coming in for Rethinking Grading pilot. Would that be Dr. McCober or Dr. Kelly? Okay.
So just very briefly, I did send this update to the school committee, but we were one of 5 districts that were selected in a very competitive process to work with the Department of Education on rethinking traditional grading practices. As we all know, because we've been doing this work for some time, there are some aspects of traditional grading that are actually inhibiting students from achieving their highest potential and that prevent certain kids from accessing rigorous curriculum. And we've been working to undo that, especially because more often than not, the kids that fall in that category are boys who are black and brown. And so we're going to work with these 4 other districts. We've each received a grant of $150,000. I don't know why Melrose got $350 less than everybody else. It's an odd thing, but we're going to work with them. We're going to have a community of practice that meets regularly throughout the coming school year. And assuming that we meet our targets for next school year, there'll be an opportunity to have a second year funded. And so probably the main thing that we're going to do, in addition to collaborating with these other districts, is we're going to have a full-time grading practices coach, I don't know what the name is, who's going to really bring the work in. And, you know, one of the things that I think you'll see when we go over the progress on the district goals is we've made a lot of progress at moving to competency-based grading at the middle school level, but we've struggled a bit at the high school. And this grant focuses specifically on high school level work. So it will really help us move forward in that initiative to bring a whole competency-based learning environment through District K through 12. I don't know if Danielle, if there's anything I missed there.
Dr. Kelly, is that grading coach just for Revere or for the 5 districts?
It's just for Revere High School.
Okay, great.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Anyone have questions?
I just want to add one more.
Ms.
So
Ty?
it'll be Dr. Porter who's heading up the project? And
Dr. Porter and Dr. Costa both took the lead on writing this grant, and they'll work together to implement it. Dr. Porter is the one who submitted it to DESE, which is why you see the communication going through her.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's it. Well, they're both stars, so I think it's great. Thank you to them.
Okay.
Stacy, question?
Yes, Ms. Milbury Ellis.
Sure. Dr. Kelly, can you just give us a little bit more information on how this Rethinking Grading pilot is different from what we're already doing?
I think it's not terribly different. I think it's going to give us some more thought partners that are near us geographically and might have some different experiences and ideas that can inform our work. But one of the reasons we applied for the grant is because it aligns so well with what we're already doing.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, moving on. No field trips because they're on school vacation. Okay, with no questions on school calendar, we'll move on to number 2, discussion of YouTube and Zoom for school committee, subcommittee meetings. Well, hopefully things will change July 15th and we can continue with remote participation. But in the meantime, the discussion would be, is this committee would like to continue using the Zoom and YouTube format. Yeah, it doesn't take much for me. Ms. Milbury Ellis?
Do you mean in addition to the in-person?
Yes.
Stacy,
Mr. Ferranti?
if we eliminate the YouTube, how would people be able to watch the meetings? Unless we're putting it on channel 8 or 9 or 22. No.
I mean, I really like the idea of the participation. I mean, let's face it, we've had more participation during COVID than we ever did before. And even if it's on YouTube, it's live, so they're seeing it firsthand, and there's ability to comment on YouTube. So I would like to see some type of format, me personally, for the public to be able to participate in the meetings. Ms. Gravellisi.
Thank you, Ms. Rizzo. I just have a question. You mentioned July 15th. I'm not sure it's something that I'm not aware. Is there something changing with the open meeting law, or?
Yes, it was extended to July 15th that we could use Zoom. And hopefully, they'll rethink that.
I know some of the discussion when we mentioned this was just the amount of time it takes to set up, like all the equipment, the delays, so on and so forth. So that's what brought this to the agenda. Having all the Zoom options. I'm in favor of it being taped so that, you know, someone can go back and watch it. But it's sometimes the Zoom is sometimes, you know, it can be interruptive because the connectivity is poor and, you know what I mean, the lag time. So that, to me, is more the discussion of the Zoom. I'm not in favor, I am in favor of videoing it so people can go back and review it and watch it, or even watch it live.
Ms. Milbury Ellis?
Yeah, I would be in favor of any and all modes of gathering participation from the public, whether it's through Zoom or through YouTube. I think in this day and age, with the technology that we have, there's no reason that we shouldn't be implementing every tool at our disposal. I mean, you see, look, this is the public participation. Do you see? And I bet if you go on YouTube, there's probably hardly any. So why would we ever even consider restricting access to people to our meetings? That's my position. Thank you.
Dr. Kelly?
Sorry, not that you need me to weigh in, but
No.
I do follow up on the school committee's YouTube channel quite regularly. And even though you're right, Ms. Milbury Ellis, that there are often not too many people that are watching it live, but there are people who go back and watch it later. And if you check a few days after the meeting or a week after the meeting, there would be several hundred views. So I do think it's a resource that people use. And one of the things that Mrs. Rizzo and I were talking about this last week, and we went on and did a little practice on the YouTube. And the nice thing is that you can put on closed captioning, and you can change the language to whatever language you prefer. And I think that's a huge benefit to a lot of our families who might want to watch the meeting in a different language or understand what's being said in a different language.
Yeah, I know personally, I would love to keep the YouTube live, to give, and maybe the other 100 people come in 2 days later and just watch it. I know a couple of days later, I don't have a life. I go on it, I look at my notes to make sure I took the right notes. But I just think sometimes there is someone that might have that question. If it's only one public person, I don't see a problem. I just want people involved. Ms. Milbury Ellis?
Yeah, I guess I'm missing the context of this discussion. Is there something going on where we're considering not using these modes of communication?
I will say, I don't know what this came out of, but I did see it on the agenda, and that's when I approached Dr. Kelly about open meeting law and closed captioning. I don't know where the original part came from. In the past, we did not have videos of our subcommittee meetings and our committee of the whole until COVID came. And I just think to go back to that standard is not really professional.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know who brought it up.
Okay,
But-
thank you.
Anyone have any questions? Ms. Ty?
No, I'm fully in favor for all the reasons that everyone has said, that it's wonderful that we have participants and people follow up and give you a phone call, and maybe you wouldn't have got that phone call if they hadn't been watching the meeting. So I'm all in favor of doing it. So is it appropriate at this time to make any motion that we continue with this?
You can make a motion on it. It's just really
You're just trying to get a sense of how we feel?
yeah, how we want to go forward.
Well,
So, I mean, if you want to be formal,
I move that we continue providing the service of YouTube and Zoom for all school committee meetings and subcommittee meetings.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next item, meeting dates for the remainder of the school year. My apologies, when I first sent this back out, I don't know, I had our meetings on Wednesday. I can't. So Robin was nice enough to correct it, and like she corrects all our information. So right now, if we go by the third Tuesday of each month, we have July 19th, August 16th, September 20th, October 18th, November 15th, and December 20th. Does anyone have any questions or concerns with any of those days? Ms. Milbury Ellis?
No concerns, just curious if we've given any further thought to the 2 meetings per month. We had discussed that instead of having the long, 3-hour, 4-hour meetings. Just throwing it out there.
I think now that we're finishing this school year, that would be a great thing to start talking about, so that we can prepare for the new school year. Mayor?
Just one quick comment. The 19th is an election day in the city, and I don't know if that matters to anybody, but just wanted to throw it out there that July 19th is a special election that day.
Ward 5? Does anyone see a problem with that? No, I don't think so. I think it, okay, now we're back on to regular meeting and agenda items and miscellaneous. We've already heard from Attorney Capizzi and Mr. Fahey. Anyone else have anything they need to bring up? See, Ms. Ty?
Is this going to be, this I expected would go onto the regular school committee meeting, we're under reports of subcommittees,
What?
this topic.
What topic?
The topic of calendar.
Yeah, it's on the regular meeting. It is. Number 3.
Yes, I know.
You want to take something off that you want?
No, I just.
She doesn't mean the consent calendar, she means the school calendar.
A meeting calendar?
Oh, no, I'm talking about the school calendar before, so that. Okay, I just wanted to be sure, because we had discussed earlier that that it could come up under this calendar, so I just wanted to be sure that we didn't close the meeting without having addressed something we should have addressed.
I wasn't privy to any of that information.
Oh, you were right
So-
here, yeah, we were talking about it.
I came in late, so if you had the conversation.
Oh. Sorry.
So anyone else have something they would like to bring up? I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
Can I ask one question before we adjourn?
Sure,
Yeah,
Dr.
this is
Kelly.
on the Zoom and YouTube thing. I'm just wondering if we should frame that as we want to continue providing video services. I just don't know if we want to specifically say Zoom and YouTube, if Zoom becomes too expensive or whatever the case may be. Yeah, or if there's some other
Right.
platform.
What if it changes?
No, video
Yeah.
services is,
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
Why don't we simply amend?
they're not that expensive either,
Yeah.
but
They're not, but it adds up.
I know. Okay, entertainment for an adjournment.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank. We'll see you at 6.